how do you make your melodies shine? The obvious way would be to use EQ, boost the highs, or reverb delay. All of these things work perfectly fine. But I thought I'm going to talk about some more ways you can make it more interesting, where you can get creative. I'm going to start off with my first way to make my melodies shine. That is filter and pitch bend automations. We have this melody right here. If we now add a filter automation, I've done my preparations obviously and prepared one where I would just open the filter to some climaxes of the melody just to get some movement into the melody, and then it sounds like this. It's not that static anymore. It becomes like a phrase and tells more of a story, if you will. We can add to that with a pitch bend automation where I just would accentuate some notes with some short pitch bends, like on those notes that I would think should be accentuated. Here on the first note I pitched it up, so it does the do, and this is the do. Pitch down, but so fast that it's basically just gonna give you more attack, and that's what you want. So those are like the first two things I think about when doing pitch bend automations. The third thing is at the end of a note, a small pitch bend down, so it's not just the note being played, but it descends just a tiny bit. It just gives it more character. Also, what I really like, it might be a bit weird on this plucky type lead, but I like it really much on more sustained leads, where I would just pitch it up like a teeny weeny tiny bit, little bit on a note, just to give it some nice feel to it. Do you know what I mean with the small pitch bend right here? It's really subtle, but I think it makes a huge difference in making it more expressive. In a way. That's it already for pitch bends and filter automations. Obviously you can automate everything you want to make it more unique and more creative, but I think, in my opinion, filter and pitch is the first thing I would go to. It's really simple. The next thing I want to talk about are chords. Obviously chords are there to support your melody or the drop, or fill the gap in the middle between lead and bass. And sometimes you don't even need chords in a drop. Sometimes you don't even need a lead. Sometimes you don't need anything. But I find that if you put the chords in the same rhythm like the lead, to layer the lead with the chords, if that makes sense to you, then we don't have the lead like this. But with the chords together, it just sounds fuller. The important thing here is that you make the ADSR, or the decay especially, of your chord sounds approximately the same length as your lead. Because if you put the sustain all the way up and the decay even further, then it doesn't fit right. It's also nice, don't get me wrong, in some occasions this might be the solution to just fill up the background. But in this case we want to give some sparkle into our melody and our lead. And obviously put kickstart or some sort of sidechain on the lead as well as on the chords. Preferably the same type of sidechain, which I have done, yes. Like the same, the same style. That's the way to keep it clean. So for the processing on the chords, I made them like really bright with OGT and lots of reverb to make it sparkle around the melody. You can take it a step further in every idea I'm dropping you, by the way. Do your own thing, take what you want from this. But in this example I took like a tremolator. You can also do a volume automation. I put it on 16ths. It just moves a little bit more. I know that way it doesn't follow the rhythm of the melody, but you can also adjust the mix knob right here. That way it becomes more interesting again. That brings us to the next one. That is the Haas Effect. I don't know if you've heard of it. I actually heard from this from Jonas Aden back in the days when he used to make Future House and not pop. I love this content and its tutorials. I'll leave the link to the video right here. Basically, the Haas effect is that you have two signals coming from left and right, but you would shift them slightly so that one of these signals comes earlier to your head than the other. So if the left signal comes earlier, then you would think that the overall signal comes more from the left, something with stereo theory, I don't know. That way you can make it wider and bigger, and it works with everything: bass, chords, melody. I've prepared this already. So you take your melody, consolidate it with Command Option and C on Mac. For Windows that's Control Alt and C. Then you put it twice, make the second thing unique, and then you take one of those two signals and shift them slightly to the left or right. I've taken the second signal and I would hard pan the first one to the left, second one to the right, so the left one comes earlier as the right one. And it's just so slightly offset that you don't hear it like a usual delay. It just creates like another dimension to it, I guess. And I also processed the Haas layer a bit differently with a lot of OTT, decapitator, and just those frequencies I want to add to my main signal. That way I'm just gonna mix it in while playing this. It's a really subtle but important difference, I would say, because this way it's just getting wider. Next way to make your melodies more interesting and make them shine are layers. Just layer your melody with everything, because why not? That brings me to a cool feature in FL Studio I've noticed way too late. It's the layer feature. So you click on the plus and then select layer, and it gives you just this menu. And with this you can link any instruments you want to this layer. So as you see here, I've written this melody right here, but not only will the one vital layer play, but all other layers that I've linked to this. So we have this. And now your main melody, main synth gets the support it needs to cut through the mix and shine above all of the rest of the drop. The way you link your layers to the layer plugin, I don't know what you call this, you get it, is by selecting everything you want to link together. So just a few like this, and then press on Set Children while these are selected. When you've done that, you can see here, then every layer will play this melody. Last but not least, peak controller. I don't know what it's called in other DAWs, but in FL Studio it's peak controller. Basically, this is a control panel. It registers when the lead is playing. As you can see, every time the lead plays, it writes this graph right here. You can use this graph to control other parameters in other plugins, samples, whatever. And actually, the main vocalist on a few of my upcoming tracks just mentioned this like yesterday in a studio session. Said to me like, what if you sidechain chords to the lead? But she meant this. And it's genius. Shout out to Motion for having this idea. She deserves the credit. So the way you do this is you have your P controller on your lead like this. And then you take your chords, for example, and then you automate the filter or anything you want to the P controller. Now you can't right click and link this to the P controller directly in FL Studio, but you can just move it slightly so FL Studio recognizes it as the last thing you move. Then right click on this little knob right here and link to controller. I did this already, and select peak control and peak as the internal controller. Don't click on remove conflicts, so make sure this is not selected, accept. And then we have this. Now you can say, yeah, but that's just the same thing as layering the lead with the chords, because they also play at the same time. And you're right, that is basically the same thing, but this way you can link anything to the lead, not just chords. I also have like just a sample, an ambient sample, and I did the same thing but with the volume. That way, every time the lead plays, the sample is pulled up in volume this much as the P controller detects it. This is one note, so it only plays an A flat, but it gives more color to the lead. I love it. You can also adjust how the P controller reacts to your sound. So if you raise the bass, it just starts louder. It's really self-explanatory. If you pull up the volume, it does more. Now the tension is also self-explanatory. You just have to experiment with that. If you put it to the left, it makes it shorter, more quiet. If you put it to the right, it makes it a bit longer, a bit more loud. Just play with it. And the decay here, it's also just standard decay, so how long the sample plays after every hit of the P controller. Important thing to mention is that it's not in seconds, it's in, as you can see at the top, that it's in percentage, so the decay speed. If you have this down, it's a really long decay. As you pull this up, it shortens the decay further and further. I also have another sample that I put in the fruity granulizer. I don't know exactly how granular synthesis works. I'm just playing with these knobs right here and wait for something cool to happen. So right now, if you play a note in this, it's going over the sample a bit like backwards, but also not, I guess. And this sample, I did the same thing like with the other sample, just linked the volume automation to the P controller, and that way we also have this linked to the lead. And I think that's really cool because it's just these little sparkles up top that you don't really notice at first, but it's just, it shines, you know, as the title of the video says. And if you put everything together, it sounds like this. It's a bit random, especially with the granulizer, but that's the catch, I think, because that makes it more human, more interesting, and creates more movement, which makes it unique, in my opinion, at least. You can also get creative with the processing of those things that are linked to the lead. I've just put some EQ, compression, OTT, transient processor, so the decay is even shorter, and reverb on this. But as you can see, I put Supermaster from Valhalla. This is free, by the way. On this is a delay / reverb, and this way it gets even more dreamier and wide because it just has this long sustain or long fade out of the delay plugin. So another world opening up. Do you know what I mean? I hope so. I just love this technique. I'm gonna leave links to Motion's socials down in the description. You should check her out. Also, you're gonna be hearing some tracks of her singing and me producing in the future. Stay tuned for that. Anyways, I think that's it for this video. Tell me if you liked it. Tell me if you have more ideas on how to implement these techniques into your productions. Like and subscribe. As always, stream my song. It's dropped like a month ago or so. And I'll see you next week. Goodbye.